So the idea behind this case was, is it possible to elevate the mood of the shopper in the store? So in this study, they wanted to test whether it's possible to elevate the mood of a shopper. And then just what they did was to give them a flower. So we looked at different things. We'd have eye tracking, just on glasses to see what they're looking at. We would have heart rate. So the heart rate, the pulse is accelerated. That means that the arousal is higher, that they are a little bit more excited. Galvanic skin response, that's a measure of the connectivity of the skin, which means that you are sweating, which is also an indicator of arousal. Then they would fill up a survey and have some interview, and they did some voice pitch analysis. And
this reminds me of something we had a bank client about 10 years ago, and they were doing an opening, and one of the things we thought would be kind of cool would be to have the smell of warm chocolate chip cookies just in there, and people loved it. They would just wanted to walk in and just be there. And
Yes, extra senses.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially smell, right? Like
Yeah.
the smell is like the most primitive of all the smells.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
So
going to have more impact
when
in
it comes to
your memory.
smell, it's the only sense that has a direct connection straight into the brain. It doesn't go through the relays of the brain. It's actually also the only neurons that you have that are exposed out to the air. So the nerves that are picking up chemicals in the air, those are neurons. Those are brain cells that are out there. So it's really powerful. I mean, go to the mall and kind of smell your way through the mall. You'll notice that things are being piped in by each specific outlet. It's usually not. They don't usually have freshly baked cookies, but it gives you that feeling of grandma or like warm home kind of feeling.
Right.
Or you go to some grocery stores and you can grind your own coffee and then it smells like coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's super effective.
Exactly.
Yeah, smell is the most powerful of all the senses to create these implicit memory associations. But that's harder outside of the consumer experience, like on TV.
I would add to that to say that to kind of create this multisensory experience is not just about kind of having a physical experience, because we're kind of these prediction-making kind of simulating machines. So if you're able to kind of evoke that in the person enough, it's almost as if they had the chemicals kind of going into the nose. So for example, if you were to just kind of close your eyes right now and imagine kind of what a chocolate mousse tasted like, and really thought about kind of the color of the chocolate mousse and like the flecks and the place or the specific chocolate mousse that you had. You can feel it on your tongue. It's beginning to melt. You're kind of slowly kind of like letting it dissolve into your mouth. I mean, you can almost really kind of really taste that chocolate mousse. And what you're doing at that point is just tapping in to those old memories that trigger the sensory areas of your brain as if you were having the chocolate mousse right then and there. So you can kind of use all these senses without necessarily kind of actually physically affecting the senses.
Then when we look at eye tracking, that was very interesting, because what we saw, and we can show the video in a second, is that actually the people that receive the flower, they spend more time looking at the product and less time looking at the price. And that sounds like really, but I have, this is some heat maps, but I have the actual video that exemplifies from some of the participants that we can show right now. So this is someone who did not receive the flower. And you can actually look at the gaze, which is obviously the middle of the cross. And they look at the product, but they also look at the price, and they look at the product, and they look at the price, and that's on the left. Yeah. And on the right, they just look at the product, and more product, and more product. And they're more excited, not happier, so they don't care. All because of the flower.
So what happened? Why did the flower in our brain elicit the permission to let price be one of the least barriers, which typically we think of it as one of the most important barriers? It seems like the flower flipped that.
I would tie it to context and kind of expectation. So like as an example, like if I were to just lay this box right here, what is in that box? You already have kind of ideas about what could be potentially in this box because of the room that we're in, the people that are here on this panel, the situation that we're in. But what if I were to lay out something like this?
Yeah, what is in that box?
Yeah, what is in that box? What if I were to lay this out
and
I were to put on latex gloves? Now, what could potentially be in that box? And what's really interesting is that it's not about what's actually in the box, it's what you expect to be in that box that dictates reality. And that has to do with kind of your physical sensations as well as the context of the place you're in. So a really interesting example, there's one study down out in Israel where they looked at judges who grant parole. And so what they saw was that as judges they granted parole at their usual rate up until the hour before lunchtime. And then they were less likely to grant parole. And after they had lunch, it got back to the usual rate of granting parole. And the idea is that it was likely that they had this feeling of hunger, this kind of discomfort, which they associated with the person that they were deciding whether or not to grant parole, and creating this reality that that person is not a good person. That gut feeling that they would normally trust was actually fooling because of physiological reasons. Wow. So giving the flower might have put someone in a more relaxed state, which led them to kind of assume that this was a friendly environment, that nothing could really hurt me. And so they were more likely to explore kind of the options that were available as opposed to exploring how not good this experience is going to be.
Right. It also seems purely benevolent,
Right.
Like, oh, thank you. You don't want anything in return for that.
Right.
There's something about that. Maybe you feel like you can give back a little more, open yourself up.
Right, exactly.
Where you wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a flower is like a primary reinforcer that is always going to make you happy, like a puppy and a baby. But a brand is not. So with a brand, you need to build that implicit association. You have to build that equity, and for that, advertising is very important.